Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. I'm actually really fascinated about what's going on with Comicsgate and with the Comics Pros and with the comics industry in their attempt to destroy Comicsgate, their subtle but obviously coordinated attacks against Comicsgate. Because, well, there's two things. Some people keep asking the question, well, why in the world do these people actually attacking their customer base and excluding massive amounts of their customers from buying products when they're in an industry that's actually not doing very well? And they can't figure out why they would do that. And sort of want to answer that question, but I want to go over it because really it just fascinates me. It's really strange because, I studied human nature and things like just how people interact with each other politically in different ways. And I always like to study those things. And I read about some of these things before, but, it's like watching in real time someone go crazy. That's what we're doing right now. That's what I'm doing anyways. And I find it fascinating. And, it's not just go crazy, but it's like watching, I guess it would be like watching a narcissist and seeing his world just unravel and see him crumble right before your eyes. That's exactly what I'm watching here when I go to the Twitter page of John Crusata or to, any of these other ones that are working for any of these SJW companies or just for Marvel or DC itself, because they seem to be like a proxy for this giant SJW is what it is, because these SJWs in the company are making the company act like an SJW. It's really fascinating to watch the craziness unfold. And that's what I wanted to go over. I wanted to go over because, I find it fascinating, but to answer that question to some degree, why they would be doing this, because they do have a reason. It's not a good reason, but they do have an actual reason for it if you look at it in the right way. Because the thing is that, I said in one of my other videos that, and I was kind of being a little bit dramatic when I said that these people belong in mental institutions. Now, I actually was being dramatic, but at the same time, the principle still holds. They are not entirely mentally stable people. They do belong not in general population, but in a place where they can get some help, because these people are not playing with a full deck. And part of why that is because they're narcissists. It's what it is. I went over this in a different one of my videos, but I linked it to the fact that they're probably also narcissists. But when you look at it, really, when you look at just them as being narcissists, it really plays out, and you be able to understand what in the world is going on. Okay, so for those of you who don't really study these things and don't really know what narcissism is, I'm sure you all have some idea of what narcissism is, but it all goes back to, the ancient Greek myth where you had Narcissus. There was this guy, and he fell in love with this nymph, and she wanted nothing to do with him because nymphs are shy and all that. And so he employed Arroz, what's his name in English? It would be Cupid, right? To help him, and Cupid gave him one of his arrows, and the arrow was enchanted so that whoever the arrow hit, the next person they saw, they would fall deeply in love with. And this guy's plan was to shoot the nymph with the arrow and then jump out so that she would see him, so that she would fall in love with him. But this idiot dropped the arrow on his own foot, and the next person that he saw was his own reflection in the water, and therefore he fell deeply in love with himself. And after that point, and there's different stories, but after that point, some of the stories say that the nymph came and tried to stop him from doing what he was doing because he was ignoring his own health. He wouldn't eat, and he would do all these things that would be self-destructive, and, she's probably playing hard to get at the first of the story. So he ignored her, and in the end he died because he drowned himself trying to kiss his reflection in the water. And that's where you get the idea of narcissism, and that's really the basic notion of it, because you have this person that is so in love with themselves that they will even do self-destructive things in order to love themselves, which kind of doesn't make sense, but that's why it's crazy. And at the same time, they will actually ignore people, at best ignore them, and certainly they will pay no attention to what other people want. So the thing is with a narcissist, they are, to some extent, they're broken, right? Is to say that they don't have the normal mechanism of dealing with reality that you and I would have. Now, I would say a very good and simple definition of a crazy person is someone who has no mechanism of dealing with reality. That would be, that would lead to craziness. That would be craziness. But these people, they don't have an internalized mechanism for dealing with it. For some reason or other, and it can be various different reasons, they don't have this internal mechanism. You and I would have something like, conscience, which conscience is it's two old Latin words meaning to re-understand, So you're re-understanding what you already understand. It's an internal mechanism because your understanding is within you. You're re-examining that understanding. It's an internal thing, So if you're faced with a problem, it didn't go right for you. Therefore, you re-examine your understanding of how this happened and all that kind of stuff. So you and I would have that normal mechanism internally to deal with this. But narcissists are so shallow internally that they have no internal mechanism whatsoever to deal with problems. So what they do to deal with problems so that they don't go insane, so that they're not crazy, is to impose a mechanism on the external. That is to say, they take their will and they try to impose it on everything external to them. Because they have no internal mechanism of dealing with these things, they use an external mechanism. So the thing is that they try to impose their will on everything around them. And of course, if you're a person around them, they're also going to try to impose their will upon you. And of course, since they're narcissists and they think way too much of themselves, they obviously think that they know better than you. And yes, they have every right to impose their will upon you and that you should follow their will. Now, this is what a narcissist does, right? And you can see this just coming out in the comic industry. You can really see it. And well, you can see why, for several different reasons, why the people in the comic industry would be narcissists. Just because, well, your SJWs, you got SJWs in there, right? And your socialist communist mindset, that is really a narcissistic mindset. I would firmly believe that if I got to examine, someone like Marx or Engels, they would be narcissists. The people who came up with these ideas to begin with. Because, well, they deny right off the bat that any human nature exists. All that internal that you and I depend on, they don't believe any of that internal exists at all, that it's all external, right? So, right again, they don't have their ideology right there doesn't have any reference to the internal at all. Just like them, just like a narcissist, right? And at the same time, what does this have to do? What does a socialist communist ideology do when they want to have control? Well, they impose their control on the outside. And it's always outside control. Because, of course, if anything goes wrong for a communist, socialist, they always point the finger at someone else. Because they always say that all the bad institutions are what causes everything that's bad in the world. It has nothing to do with internally, right? It's always the bad institutions. So if something goes wrong for them, they always point the finger at someone else and saying it's their problem. And it's the exact same thing that a narcissist does. He doesn't have the mechanism to look inside and to say, maybe I'm the problem. No, he points his finger at someone else and says, this is your problem. You didn't follow my will, therefore you're the problem. And that's what a narcissist does, right? And at the same time, of course, ignoring the idea that there's any human nature, your narcissist also does that in the fact that he ignores the fact that you have a human nature. And one of the fundamental, if not the fundamental thing of human nature throughout human history that people have come up with is that I have a free will. I get to choose by myself, by my free will. That's just one of the basic, if not the most basic part of human nature. But your SJW will deny that in you. He'll say, no, you follow my will. You don't get to exercise your own will because I know better than you. And that's the same thing that happens with your socialist, communist kind of ideology. And at the same time, you would see why people like in the comic industry and even just like the literary industry in general would have people like narcissists gravitate towards it. Because, of course, if you're writing a fiction story, well, for a narcissist, that's just like creating their own world. They're the god of that world, and they get to manipulate the rules so that everything goes their way. Now, you can have a person write a story that way, and it actually might be an interesting story. I really don't think that a narcissist would make a good writer, but at the very least, it's very much in their vein of how they think. And at the same time, you get the people like the people running Marvel, right? They're all managers. And a manager just tells other people what to do for the most part. And a narcissist would play right into that. Again, I don't think a narcissist would be a terribly good manager, but at the very same time, he has the same skill set to look like he is a good manager, just because he micromanages everybody around him. And that's what he normally just does, right? So you got the people at the top, you got your managers, they can be very easily substituted for narcissists. You got the people at the bottom, your creative people, they could very easily be substituted for narcissists. And that's what has happened. And the funny thing is, as I'm always going on about, the reason why there is no tether to reality for these people, the reason why these two groups have gone this way is because that tether was normally your people in your editing department, because they tied together those two groups. The editing department tied together your people who are doing your creative things and the managers. And at the same time, they tied them into reality, because a editor is usually a pretty down-to-earth person, right? They are not really the narcissist type, because, well, usually they have to just admit to themselves, well, I wanted to be a writer, but I don't have the skill, therefore I'm going to be an editor. Or at the same time, I want to be a writer someday. I'll have to build up to that. That takes a lot of internal examination of self to come to that point. And at the same time, they're dealing with language, which has a lot of rules imposed upon it from outside. It's got definitions. It's got, this is where your punctuation goes. It has all these things imposed from somewhere else. And they have to accept that, and they apply that. So I would say your editors are the people that would tie all the rest down to your reality. But of course, you don't have editors like that anymore. They had to get rid of all those editors, as I said in another one of my videos. You know, the political correctness has killed all those editors and made sure that they don't speak up, even if they are there, because if they do speak up, they'll be called, you know, racist or whatever else they can come up with to call them, to get them to shut up, because they don't want them imposing outside rules upon them. That's why they can't edit anymore, and that's why all these stories look like they're a first draft. That's why all of this art look like it's written or drawn by a 4-year-old, right? Because the editors can't do their job. So you can see why narcissists not only would gravitate towards these positions, and because they do this, they would expel the people that would actually help out the industry, you know, your people who are in your editing. So that's, I say, what would have happened in this industry. It really seems like that. And the proof is in the pudding, really, in what they're doing right now. Because here's the thing. What happens to a narcissist when someone actually tries to, tries to rebuke them, tries to say, no, look, I'm not going to follow your will. I got my own will, and I'm going to do what I want. Well, the narcissist, well, he will start to scream, and he will call you every nasty name in the book. He will try to discredit you. He will try to make you think that you're crazy. He will try to make everybody else think that you're crazy. And so he will do everything he can to make sure no one listens to you. He will basically say to himself, okay, you exercised your free will, which was against mine. I am going to punish you for it and make sure that if you ever try to do it again, you will remember that horrible punishment so you never do it again. Now, at the same time, you also have a narcissist saying, okay, this is what happens when things go right for me. I have a plan for everybody and everything and how my life is going to go and how everybody in my life is going to act and is supposed to act according to my will. Therefore, he includes in his plan for his day everything that you're going to think, everything that you're going to feel, everything that you like, everything that you don't like. He has all that planned out according to his will. That's what a narcissist does if you're in his sphere of influence, right? And of course, that's what's going on at Marvel right now, right? They're putting out things like Iceman saying, no, we're putting this out. You are going to like it. We already have made this decision. You will like it and you will buy it. And the thing is that you have your people like us in Comicsgate saying, no, you know what? I like things that I like, and I'll tell you what I like, and I'll buy the things that I like. And according to the narcissist, well, that's the worst kind of affront to them that they can imagine. And of course, that's what happens. And then they start calling us racists and homophobes and, bigots and everything else that they can call us, because of course, they're narcissists who are being challenged. And that's what happens when a narcissist is challenged. That's exactly what they do. It's textbook narcissism. That's what you can see. That's what I'm witnessing, right? I'm witnessing textbook narcissism. But at the same time, the reason why it has been ramped up so much in the last little while is because of what I said at the first, of course, because, these people don't have an internal mechanism to deal with their problems. Therefore, they use an external mechanism and they impose their will upon everything and everyone else around them. But when we started to exercise our own will and say, no, we're not buying that. No, that's going to get canceled because no one's going to buy that. No, we're going to criticize this. Well, guess what? We are destroying their external mechanism. That's what we're doing. And that's why they see it as an attack, because we're destroying the external mechanism that they need to stay sane. Because since they don't have an internal mechanism and we are destroying their external mechanism, that leaves them with no mechanism to deal with reality, which is how you get to be a crazy person, right? That is literally a crazy person. If you have no ability to deal with reality, you are insane. And that's what's happening because, of course, as I said, us just simply exercising our own free will to buy what we want, to say what we want, and to tell others that this is bad, this is good. Don't listen to these people putting out these comics. Don't buy these comics that are being put out. No, that's just us exercising our free will. And that is destroying their world because, of course, they have no mechanism to deal with it if you are using your own free will. And they are not allowed to impose their will on you. And that's what's going on. That's why this is being ramped up, because they're like a caged animal or an animal that's been cornered, right? They're just fighting back tooth and nail with everything they got now, because if you take away from them this level of control, because narcissism is all about control, then they have no control, because they can't go back like you and me to that internal control, because they don't have that. And since they don't have it, they will have no control and they will be driven insane. And that's why these people are fighting like caged animals, are fighting like animals backed into a corner. That's what's happening. And like I said, it's fascinating to watch when you actually know what's going on. It really is. And I actually want to talk about this subject a little more. I've probably gone on a little bit too long today, but there's a lot of things to unpack in this. But that's the reason why they're doing it. That's the answer to the question. Why are they excluding people when this is actually destroying their industry in an industry that's already shrinking? Because they're like cornered animals. This is what a narcissist is. They are just plain old narcissists, and they have no other way of dealing with reality. Anyway, if I gave you anything new to think about, hit like, hit that shield on the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a message, leave me a comment, give me something new to think about. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.